Let us take a look at the role of intermediaries in any business transaction and why it is important to understand in the context of blockchain. Let's start with an example. It is a holiday and you visit your nearby supermarket to purchase some groceries. While paying the bill, you swipe your credit card, sign the receipt and conclude your purchase. Sounds simple, right? However, it is an incredibly complex process in the background that involves multiple steps and multiple parties to complete. So, why do we need these parties? And in the first place, why am I starting this session on the roles of intermediaries with this example? First, most of you, if not all, must have used the credit card or a debit card at some point and therefore will be able to relate to this example easily. Second, the number of intermediaries involved to complete this type of a transaction is large and the back-end process complex. So let's jump to the example straight away. Let us start with understanding the steps that were carried out between your swiping the card and signing the receipt. The moment you swipe the card, the information flows through the supermarket or merchant's system to the payment processing company and credit card networks ending at the cardholder's bank. Once the bank approves the transaction, it flows in the reverse back through the same chain to the supermarket to let them know the payment was successful. Credit card processing is mainly carried out between four principal parties or intermediaries: the merchant, supermarket in our example, their bank, the credit card processor, the credit card networks, and the consumer bank. So, what are these intermediaries? Merchant bank, also called acquirer, is the bank with which a business, in our case supermarket, holds their funds. They equip business owners with card readers to accept card payments and are primarily responsible for crediting the company's account with funds once a credit card sale goes through. Credit card processor plays the role of a messenger between the business and the cardholder's bank. They are responsible for securing the data related to payment and ensuring that the transaction adheres to the set rules. They collect fees from the merchant bank for providing this service. Credit card network works with the card processor to transfer data between the consumer bank and the merchant bank. They are responsible for setting the interchange and assessment fees by the network. Interchange fees, the most substantial cost in any credit card processing, are passed on to the consumer bank. Networks collect the nominal assessment fees, which are usually a fraction of the interchange fees. Consumer bank, also called issuer bank, is your bank, which has provided you with the credit card that you have used to purchase your groceries. The most important function of the consumer bank is to determine whether the cardholder, that is you, have appropriate funds to complete this purchase. It then releases the funds so that the transaction can be completed. Depending on the type of the card, the interchange fees will be charged. Now this raises a logical question. Why do we need so many intermediaries in this process? Let us look at the need for intermediary in a traditional transaction life cycle. The most fundamental aspect of any kind of economic exchange is the trust between the transacting parties. In our example, the merchant trusts that the credit card transaction will eventually get honored, as at the time of the purchase the consumer has not paid. If this transaction was done online, then the consumer trusts that the merchant will deliver the merchandise that consumer has bought using his or her credit card. Trust forms the basis of any such exchange. Every individual initiating a transaction has a reasonable expectation that the person or organization with whom he considers trading will not take undue advantage. Without this expectation, the risk of being cheated will outweigh the potential benefits of carrying out the trade and thus cause him or her to forego it. Within a limited area or geography, we develop trust through a dense network of social interactions. For example, if we are sitting together in a conference room, it is easier to develop trust even if we are strangers at the start of the meeting. However, when individuals trade with entities beyond their sphere of influence, they must rely on other means to create trust. We are talking of trades between parties that might be in two different states or countries or even continents and might be dealing with each other for the first time. So, in the above example, the involved parties, you, the consumer, and the supermarket, rely on institutions that improve monitoring and contract enforcement, like credit card processor and credit card network, as well as intermediary organizations that internalize the cost and benefits of facilitating exchange, namely the merchant bank and your bank. Virtually every type of economic exchange that takes place requires the intervention of a trusted third party. Even a simple cash transaction contains a third party. Can you guess which might be the third party in a cash transaction? If you guessed the third party as government or the authority responsible for issuing the currency, then you are right. The government or the issuing authority assures the use of cash as a legal tender. Some examples of such issuing authorities are Reserve Bank of India and US Department of Treasury along with Federal Reserve Bank. Few other examples of third-party trust would be while transferring money to friends or family, we rely on money service institutions to oversee the transaction. When we establish a claim to a property, we rely on some central authorities to confirm our assertion. Intermediaries play a significant part in reducing uncertainty by verifying the identity of participants, monitoring clearing and settlement, and preserving a registry of these exchanges, and thereby enabling a semblance of trust among entities who have no reason for trusting each other. While intermediaries have played an essential part in establishing trust and facilitating trade, relying on them may not always be justifiable and may have inherent risks. So, what are those risks associated with intermediaries? 1. Monetary charges. Fee charged by an intermediary can be quite high. The average fee charged by a credit card company is 2% for a single transaction. Average cost for sending a remittance is 7.4%. Second, inefficiencies. In the case of cross-border financial transactions, multiple intermediaries are involved and take up about 3 to 5 days to complete a transaction like that. Security. In the case of storing sensitive data on third-party systems, cybersecurity risks pose a threat as the centralized server would be a single source of information for would-be hackers. And trusting the third party. Doubts can always arise regarding the trustworthiness of these trusted third parties on whom we rely. During the financial crisis of 2008, public confidence in financial institutions had dropped to the lowest levels. One of the primary advantages of blockchain, as the thinking goes, is that it creates trustless relationships in cryptocurrency ecosystem. Given that blockchain is a public, anonymous, immutable digital ledger, many supporters argue that it will help to usher in a new mode of conducting transactions that are not dependent on intermediaries at all. Taking the example of Bitcoin, we know that all nodes on Bitcoin network have equal privileges. What it means is that all changes to the ledger is managed mutually by users without needing any third party or somebody outside the Bitcoin ecosystem to validate transactions. But that also means that the network users assume additional risks like if a user loses his or her private key, there is no way he or she can request it from anybody, and all transactions pertaining to that key is lost. The first question would be that, will blockchain help do away with all the intermediaries in all kind of transactions or economic exchanges happening around the world? Then the answer is no. One, it is not happening in a hurry, and when it does start happening, it will not be in toto. And there will still be some intermediaries that will always be needed, although their role might change in the new blockchain world. Yet, there are some immediate benefits to be had with blockchain. And what are they? One, we have already seen the doing away with intermediaries in the case of Bitcoin, though there is a restriction that you are transacting within a single network. Two, the automation brought in by blockchain will facilitate reconciliation between independent parties who, in many cases, don't even need to trust each other. Because blockchain can synchronize data across an unlimited number of servers in real time, many of the processes from auditing to database management can potentially be made vastly more efficient. Processes like inspections and data transfers will be able to take place automatically and more efficiently.